Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Hello and welcome to Side Alpha Leadership. Welcome to February's installment. My name's David Polikoff. I'll be your host. We had a really good sit-down conversation with Sam Villani last month, and I'm expecting to move forward with today's podcast with a friend and coworker of mine, Dave Braun. Dave works in the same same county that I work in. Just recently got promoted to the rank of lieutenant. So without me taking up all this airtime, Dave, welcome, and go ahead and give a little bit of background about yourself.
Thank you. Yep. So Dave Braun started with the United States Marine Corps. That is, I guess, what you would say the beginning of the journey that led me here. So I actually signed my contract to join the Marines on September 10th, 2001. That's actually hanging in my basement. So signed the contract, young man, have a young boy, myself and my wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend, teen parent, so needed some direction and sign up, and the world kind of comes crashing down the next day, so my timeline gets accelerated. I end up at Parris Island, which is the East Coast training facility for the USMC, and this is right around Thanksgiving. So I end up in the fleet early 2002, and I enter a young rifleman, military occupational specialty, what we call 0311. The unit that I go to, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, it's an East Coast-based unit. The good thing with me is when you get to the fleet, you're kind of thrown to the wolves, and it's a pretty crazy experience in and of itself. It's a lot of people have compared it actually to going to prison for the first time.
Right.
And that's kind of a shaky metaphor, but I guess my entire life has been right place, right time, and I got really lucky. I ended up with a really good squad leader, and I spent about a year and a half as a rifleman, went on a deployment, what the Marine Corps called the longest deployment since the Vietnam War. That's because when we started, Iraq really wasn't being spoken about, and then while we were overseas, that's kind of when operations in Iraq popped off. So, and just for a frame of reference, with the Marine Corps, when we deploy, we typically don't deploy as long as the Army. Our deployments are a lot shorter. That's because when we go somewhere, say the Mediterranean Sea, and we kind of sit there, and we're essentially like a 911 for whatever else happens in the rest of the world.
The tip of the spear.
Exactly, the tip of the spear. Yep, that's what we like to call ourselves. Obviously, the Army's not too keen on that term, but that's okay. So when I came back, let me backtrack. When I was on deployment, there was a unit in our battalion. It consisted of these guys who had this sort of swagger to them. They were the ones that, I don't want to say elite because that's doing a disservice to the rest of the O3s, because really everybody, I think, that does a high impact job like that has a little bit of elite in them. But some people, I guess their want and their choice of what they want to do is a little bit more than others. So I gravitated towards these guys, and they were called the Stay Platoon, Surveillance and Target Acquisitory, or that's actually a running joke, acquisitory. It's not a word, it's acquisition. But they consisted of what the Marine Corps called the 8541s, the Scout Snipers. And when I came back from my first deployment, I had gotten up with one of their chief scouts, and I had expressed interest in wanting to be a part of that platoon, and he explained to me the process. So say fast forward maybe 3 or 4 months, and I'm in the INDOC, and I was fortunate enough to pass the INDOC. So after the INDOC, I end up at a stay platoon, and typically when you get to a stay platoon, you're supposed to spend about a year to a year and a half before you're eligible to go to the school. Again, fortune strikes in my favor. I'm back at the barracks. I'm on duty while everyone else is on block leave. It's the holidays, and my family was in North Carolina with me. Everybody else was single. They had family all over the world, so I had volunteered to stay back and take duty. everybody thought I was doing them a massive favor. At the time, my wife was a little bit upset with me because duty, 24 hours walking around the barracks doing nothing. And I get a phone call from my, what we call chief scout. He's the head of all the 3 sections in the state platoon. And he informs me that 2 of the guys that had gone to school for the winter session had actually showed up. I guess they had smelled a booze the night before or something. Mm-hmm. So they weren't having it. They called up to our battalion. They said, hey, we have these quotas and we don't want to throw them away. But if you have somebody that's ready to go right now, we'll give it to them. He called me. I called my wife. I was, hey, pack all my stuff. Let's get in there. Obviously not. She's not coming with me, but she knows.
She probably wasn't very thrilled. Either.
Right? Because unfortunately that meant more time away. But if I was able to pass, but I told her put everything green in a bag. Let's go. I ended up at the schoolhouse, and I like to focus on this because this is sort of where my experience in the Marine Corps shifted, especially in dealing with leadership, which I know is the focus of this podcast. So I was fortunate. Again, I got through this school on the first go round, and once you become a school trained scout sniper, what we call a hog, you pick up the MOS 8541. You're now a team leader. So when I went back to my platoon, I was the junior guy in the platoon, and I was now a team leader.
Right.
Obviously, there were some fellas that weren't exactly thrilled about that, but that's kind of the way it goes, and that's essentially a story of the Marine Corps. Really, any organization that has a chain of command. So I ended up doing a couple deployments with the state platoon. Got some really cool opportunities. Served on what we call an MSPF, a Maritime Special Purpose Task Force. Consists of us, recon, some elements from the SEALs. It's essentially like this smorgasbord of intelligence gathering units, and in a wartime environment, an operational environment like Fallujah, you really get to put a lot of the experiences and techniques and tactics that we're sharing across the board into place. So it was a great area to kind of hone our skills and see what worked and what didn't work for the modern scout sniper and the modern Marine in general. So 2006, I had actually extended my enlistment by a year. At this point, I am at what the Marine Corps calls the Special Operations Training Group, or SOTG. It sounds a lot more exciting than what it is. What we do is we work on the Marine infantry units that are getting ready to deploy. They go through a series of training, and we help facilitate that training, but we can also deploy within that unit. So I was considering deploying. I had to go through what we call a TAPS class, Transitional Assistance Program. And when I went through the class, I met Bob Moody. Bob Moody, he was a captain in this department. I know you know him. Mm-hmm. He used to go around to the bases, do military recruiting. So he had spoken to me about, hey, if you ever consider being a fireman. And the minute he mentioned fireman, or actually I should be saying firefighter, the minute he mentioned firefighter, it was like a light went off inside my head. I was really unsure of whether or not I wanted to stay in the Marine Corps. I didn't hate it like some people did.
Right.
But at the same time, I realized that deploying like this and staying in the MOS that I was in, it was going to be difficult. Right. We already had a second kid at this point, so I had to give consideration to my wife. I mean, she had been behind me this entire time, and, I'm picking up and leaving, and especially when I got in the state platoon, they're not going to spend all that money on you and just let you sit in the rear. So as soon as I'd heard about that, I went back and I spoke with my wife about it. And I was like, this is it. I want to get out. I want to join the fire department. This seems like seems perfect. And she was thrilled. She was like, I think that's a great idea. And then she kind of let it sit in for a minute. And she was like, well, wait a minute. You're kind of trading one devil for another as far as, I guess the dangers involved and everything. And I was like, well, look at it this way. I'll be home. I might not be in the house as much, but I won't be, 30,000 miles away. Right. So.
And gone for months at a time.
Exactly.
Right.
So she was like, the more I think about it, the more I think this is the path that you should take. So. Montgomery County was hiring late 2006. I applied, get through the academy. I end up at Station 1 when the truck was there, and I was elated. It was a great place to be. Station 1, for those who are unfamiliar, it's downtown Silver Spring. It, looks like any other city you would visit. It's just this, massive place, lots of people, high call volume. The captain who was here, the podcast before, he's actually the captain there now. So, and I know you would spend some time at one as well. Right. So it was a great place to be, and I was having an absolute blast, and was just kind of hanging out, doing my thing, running calls, learning what I could, and then we get transferred. Well, since I started at 1, I should say, as a rookie, the way I got to stay at 1 was there was an opening at Station 2. The truck from Station 2 was at Station 1. So the way they kept me at Station 1 was I put in for the opening at Station 2, and I stayed with the truck crew detailed to 1. Although at the time I wasn't a tiller truck driver, I was just the 4th person. So either way, it didn't matter. I got to stay at 1, and I loved the crew from 2 as well, so it was a win-win for me. So the truck gets transferred to Station 16, and I end up having to go with the truck crew, and I spend some time at 16 for a while, and again, I'm happy I get to stay in the 1st. It's a new crew. There were some adjustments that had to be made, versus our lieutenant and the current captain, but, things kind of worked themselves out, and I was doing good for a while, and then, I guess about maybe, I'd say 6 years into my career, I hit kind of a hiccup and hit a dark spot, and thankfully I had a fantastic shift who was right there to pick me right back up and help me out and help me get through it. And when I came back, I decided that the moderation that I felt like I was applying, just kind of going through the motions, I was done doing that. I was going to do everything 110%. I was going to pay it forward, all of the time and effort that everybody put into me. So I decided, all right, first step is getting checked off on that truck. Got checked off on that truck, realized that the best job in the fire department is a
tillerman.
Yep, is a tillerman. And furthermore, the best job in the fire department is truck company ops. I know that's always a big point of contention, but I loved being on a truck. I love the work that it involved. I love the independent mindset. The crew that I was with at the time, let's see, at 16 we had Sam Villani, he was a lieutenant. Franco Martinez, he was the truck master. So just bouncing stuff off of those two, and then the other guys that were there that were also part of the truck crew: Derek Buckley, Matt Adams, John Merrill, Wes Shipley was there, Mike Murphy was there, Bill Cook was the captain. It was a great shift. We had a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time training, perfecting our craft. It was a renewed sense for me. I realized that shift, that family that I had, I was so very fortunate to have. When I got checked off on the truck, Franco took me out to eat. He took me to this surprise dinner, bought me a shirt. He made a huge deal out of it. And it was awesome. It was awesome to me. Right. I was like, this is what it's about. This is why I love being here. This is what I love doing. It's amazing to me. I didn't want to leave, and that's kind of where I struggled a little bit with. I could stay here. I could stay in this tillerman spot for the rest of my career, or I could start to pay forward what people spent time and effort putting into me. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of hours sitting around with Sammy, Buffett New York jobs, and coming up with crazy training scenarios, and he fed all this information into me. He was exactly what I expected, a leader, and someone who's looking out for the men below them to be, and the same with Franco. Franco made that truck company. He made me feel like I was a part of that truck company, and not to dissuade anything from the engine company or the other guys in the house, but it made me feel like I was a part of something bigger and better than myself. Right. And I went from there, and I realized that when they promoted on, that if I were to stay there, I would probably stay there for the rest of my career. It was too great of a spot to leave. So, and there was a really, really big incident, Arliss Street, that had happened, and that was, I guess, almost like a culmination of all the tactics and techniques that I had been taught. I actually sustained a minor injury on that fire, and to give you an idea of how how far some of these people go, Sam actually drove all the way up to Shady Grove from Baltimore just to pick me up and drive me home.
Right.
I already had a ride,
Sure.
so and that's how Sam was. He was like, no, I have to come pick my guy up. I have to see him, and it wasn't like a major injury. It was a dislocated shoulder, but still, it's just little things like that. Franco blowing my phone up at 3 a.m. He's on vacation. Wanting to know, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? What happened? It's just, it made me realize that I need to encompass that. I need to encumber the lessons and the people that, and the time that they have put into me, and I need to pass that forward. And so that's kind of when I decided, all right, they're moving on. I'm going to finish my squad stuff up, and I'm going to go to another station just to kind of get a different perspective on the county. And from there, I went to Station 15, and I started working on my squad stuff. And I had another great crew there that helped me out and assisted me. And I had expressed that, once I was finished with my squad stuff, I was going to start focusing on the promotional test. So the promotional test came around, and once again, I've always said that my one good, feature is that I know how to surround myself with, the best people on this job, and that same family that I'd spent so much time with, they surrounded me, and they provided me with assistance. And there were some other people, Jason Smith, Chief McDonald. They helped me study for the test. They kept me focused, and to sort of get to the end of my bio, obviously, you talk about these great people, and when they put this time into you, it's going to pay off. And the time they put into me, it paid off, and now I am a freshly promoted lieutenant in this amazing department, and I'm just couldn't be more happy.
Now I know, and I know you talked about. And we'll get into that in a minute. You said, when you were at 16, that's when I met you. You talked about the little dark spot you got into. And unfortunately, that's when I met you. Mm-hmm. But it was also a fortunate thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I wanted to get back to, I was never in the military. My father and my grandfather were in the military, but I have no military background. But I've been doing a lot of research and into leadership, and what happens in the military, how it can actually kind of cross over into the fire service, and I know I know you were a sniper and a scout, and I know it's not like the movies where you go, here's your mission, here's your target, and you find somebody and you track them and you pull the trigger and you high five each other and you go home. It's not like that at all. A lot of it is like hurry up and wait, gathering intel, trying to make sure everything's right, and But I want to get to the gathering and the intel part, and getting the intel and being able to understand, what your mission is, having the correct intel, and then being able to execute your mission. How does that work for you now? I know you just got promoted to lieutenant. I'm sure you haven't had a boatload of issues being thrown at you, but one of the things that I talk about and I harp on is being engaged with your people. And being engaged with your people means that you've got to see what's going on. So, and I could be way off base, but this is an honest question, is the intel that you learned how to gather as in the Marines, do you use any of those techniques or just to be able to view people or look at situations and say something's not right and maybe I need to dig a little bit deeper? If you do, go into that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, well, first, to answer your question, yes, I do. There are so many similarities between the military and the fire department. I like to say that I traded a green uniform for a blue one, and vice versa. And there's actually, I have some guys that are still serving that are taking lessons that, we get in the fire department, and they're applying them to the military. So to give you a little bit of perspective, so with the Marine Corps, everything's kind of done in these 2-year bursts. And what I mean by that is, the average enlistment is 4 years. So you come in the Marine Corps, the way they look at it is you're going to spend 2 years as a what they call a junior Marine or a boot. You're the young guy. You're just there to listen. You're not there to talk. You're there to, learn, so on and so forth. And then after your 2 years, you are what they call a senior Marine. And I know, in the fire department, we, 2 years is nothing senior. Right.
But right. You end up having people underneath you. And it's funny because in the Marine, you're new guys, you call them boots. And that's what we'd call them back when I first started in the fire service as when I was at One Engine. We didn't have recruit classes, but, everybody was like, hey, boot, that's what they called you. And I'm like, all right, whatever that means. But I guess that means that, you're the F&G, so.
Absolutely.
So it's funny, now that I fast forward, I'm like, that's my little aha moment. So that's where I came from.
Yep. So it's actually just a little real quick history. That term boot, that's actually a Navy term. It comes from the new guys on the ship. Their boots would be polished and they weren't hit with all the salt. And actually when you call someone salty,
right.
That was a term that was used, World War II era. And it was the same thing. When you were out to sea for a long time, you got a lot of salt splashed on your uniform from the salt water if you were in a that type of environment, or just washing uniform in general would turn it white.
Right.
Hence the term salty.
So there's your transition from military into the fire as well.
So
we talk about this guy's real salty, his helmet's all dirty and all that. Although we're kind of frowning on that now, but it makes you look at that guy's been around a lot. If his uniforms are all messed up from being in the boat, that means he's been around for a while. Same thing if your helmet's kind of blackened from true fires, then that means you've been around the block.
Yep.
So
It's
a little history lesson.
It's a symbol of pride. And experience matters. It always has. It always will. So talking about what you mentioned earlier. Now, when I was really, really fortunate in my Marine Corps enlistment. I was a leader in every MOS that I held. I was a team leader in the infantry. I was a team and section leader in a state platoon. And then when I was on my way out and I got to SOTG, I was what they called a team or section or chalk or whatever fancy term they wanted to use at the time in the training group. So starting off the bat, you're dealing with three completely different types of personalities. With the infantry, you're dealing with, these young guys, they're fresh in, they want to do well, they don't ask a lot of questions, they kind of accept that, not necessarily the way the things are the way they are, but again, we don't have a lot of time. They're looking at it like, I don't have to spend 10 or 12 years here, I'm only spending 2 years, and then I'm going to hopefully be that NCO, and I'm going to be that one that's in charge.
Right.
When you get to the state platoon, you're dealing with a much more... And I hate to use the term mature because, again, I do not want to diminish anything in the O3s. The reason why, and actually in the state platoon, we always had a problem with recruitment. It had nothing to do, well, it did have a little bit to do with the INDOC, but the reality of it is a lot of these guys, we required that they have a deployment under their belt. Usually by the time you get a deployment under your belt, you've got 2 years in. By the time you've got 2 years in, you're an NCO. So a lot of these guys, they become team leaders in their platoons, and they're like, why do I want to start all the way over at the beginning when I've got 2 years left? I want to be a team leader. I want to spend some time leading, applying the stuff that, I saw my senior Marines do, and so on and so forth. So with a state platoon, it's not uncommon to have guys when they're, second enlistment, 6, 7, 8 years in, and then we have in our platoon we actually had a PFC. He got busted down, but he had probably all of 2 years, 2.5 years in the Marine Corps, and he went through the school. He became a team leader, and I don't want to say it was as a joke, but he ended up with some of the more senior guys in his team, and actually that was one of our best performing teams in the state platoon. So, those guys were eventually able to sort of put aside that, that animosity and realize that, hey, we're working towards a bigger goal. But going back to what I said, it's a completely different type of person that you're dealing with. These people that are in these platoons, they ask questions. They're really good at what they do. They've already, proven themselves through either the INDOC, through time as a probationary member in a team, through the countless field ops that they've done, all the work that they've done working up to the school. So it's a different mindset. And I don't want to, say that they back talk or anything like that. They've already, they've lived the, hey, we're just going to do things because we're told to do it, and they want to know more.
Right.
They'll do it, but they want to know more. So, and then further on down the line, when I was with SOTG, the group that I was with, it was a bunch of guys that were getting out. So their mindset really was, hey, I really don't care. But you still got to kind of find a way to reach them. And, hey, we still serve the Marine Corps here. And whether they want to admit it or not, they ultimately believed in the mission and they put forth the effort. But so the things that I picked up specifically in this school, as far as intelligence gathering, what's unique about the Stay Platoon, and I keep calling it Stay Platoon. It's not called Stay Platoon anymore. They changed the name. It's actually called Scout Sniper Platoon. They changed the MOS number, but the mission is still the same. So you talked about, tracking and hunting and stuff like that. And while, the true definition of a Scout Sniper, he's an expert in fieldcraft and marksmanship. He's able to deliver precision fire to select targets. That's actually literally right out of the mission statement. A lot of these high-end special forces units, they have their own snipers. And while we certainly are considered a special forces unit, and while we have worked with a lot of different units, if they have something important like that, like a true, I don't know what you would call it, hunter-killer mission, that's going to go to like one of the tier 1 units.
Sure.
Now, with that being said, the way that they teach us to process information, especially in the school, and not so much when it comes to intelligence gathering, but when it comes to and the 14 leadership traits, and we're going to talk about this, and I have to kind of segue this because it's a perfect example. One of them is tact, the term tact. Mm-hmm. And we, in a Stay Platoon, when we deploy, we don't stay within the platoon. We actually task out to different line companies. So we go up to the company commander who's got, 3 platoons of grunts, and we say, okay, here's what we can do for you. Here's what we can provide for you. Here's how we can operate, not only to assist the battalion, but to assist the company, the platoon, the squad, and the team level. Now, a lot of the young officers in the Marine Corps, they don't have a ton of experience. More so during my time because, the war and a lot of what was going on was brand new.
Right.
When Fallujah happened, when we originally crossed the border, we had actually stopped in part of Fallujah because it was a safe zone for us. Because, the government had worked out deals with Sadr. And there's a rich backstory of Fallujah and Iraq and how Saddam supposedly couldn't pass through Fallujah. And then fast forward, a year and a half, and we are literally, going house to house, not unlike Hue City in Vietnam, although I would never compare Iraq to Vietnam. But still, we are literally going house to house, fighting one of the most difficult battles of Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom. So all of this was new. So you have these new company commanders, and we called it the water tower syndrome. In the middle of the southern edge of Fallujah, there was this giant water tower. And if you were to look out in the middle of the city and you had no training whatsoever, and you were to hear a shot ring out, and someone were to say, hey, there's a sniper out in that city, you would say he's probably in that tower. Right? So that's what we want to avoid. A big portion of the school is they teach us to be really proficient in setting up these, they call them final firing positions. A couple of them. In the school, we stalk up to the tree line. We have instructors on the tree line. We have to fire a blank. We have to read off the number that they hold up, and then we have to move to the secondary firing position, and they're not allowed to find us. And if we apply the principles that they show us, we have no problems. One of the first stalks that one of my instructors ever did, he did hand to God, and he's notorious for doing this in his underwear. He crawled through a swamp in his underwear because he's like, that ghillie suit you use is trash.
Right.
It is. It's not trash. It's a tool. It helps you, but that does not make you invisible.
Right.
Your own, just being aware and moving methodically and burning through the bush and so on and so forth. So going back to the question, the water tower syndrome, we go up to these company commanders. We'd lay out everything we could do for them. They'd look at the water tower and they would say, we want you to set up in that water tower. And it's like, sir, that's a death trap to us. It's a death trap. Mm-hmm. If we go up in there and we're out there, just two of us, we're going to be on Al Jazeera TV getting our heads cut off.
Right.
There was a pretty infamous story about a recon sniper unit that was killed overseas. They were, operating at an observation post, and they didn't answer their radio checks. And they came out, and all of their equipment was missing. Their bodies were there. A really cool addition to this story, though, is that a member of that battalion that lost those two guys actually shot and killed one of the individuals that had his rifle. I think it was 8 years later. The Marine Corps actually recovered this stolen rifle.
Yeah.
And it's a trophy and it's hanging up in the battalion office. And that's crazy because, just to think like the likelihood of that happening.
Right.
But anyway, so tact. I think of tact is how we talk to people, more specifically, how we talk to people above us, and how we... So I could sit there and tell that company commander, sir, that's not my mission. You're going to get me killed. What the hell are you thinking?
Right.
And in that exact moment, I'm going to shut down any and all hope. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a captain.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter what I think, but only to a point. He is going to make decisions and judgment calls based on that. I don't want that. So let's bring that in the fire service. You as a battalion chief, you are, I guess, what I would consider the last operational leg of leadership. Above you, the doc might come out on fires, but really it's mostly you. Mm-hmm. So you are, all this information is being passed up to you, and the people above you might not see that, and all this information is being passed down to you from the people above you, and you have to, I'm sure, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm sure you have to use tact to block some of these things that may be coming down from up top that they're not considering. Well, this might not be the best for operations. This might not be the best for your people. Mm-hmm. No, not unlike what I did in the Marines, especially as a young sergeant sitting in a meeting with all of these officers, going over these, well-laid plans and these, 5-paragraph orders is what we call them. And they come up with a plan, and I have to say, sir, with all due respect, that plan, that's not effective. It's not, it's not best employing us. So here's maybe something else to consider. So they harped on that when I was in school, that, you're not dealing with staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants anymore. You are the person that this company commander is going to come to, and he's going to get intel from. There's no middlemen.
Right.
So you can't use the, hey, I'm a dumb sergeant. Not that sergeants are dumb, but right. So there's two things they do. One of them is they make us the literal most proficient intelligence gatherers in the world. We get a world-class training program on how to gather intelligence. Translation, good at our job.
Right.
We're good at our job. We enjoy what we do. We're good at it. And the second part is they give us, examples. Hey, this is how you want to approach this company commander. We know that he knows that you're good at your job. We know that he thinks that you're all a bunch of cowboys. They had a bunch of derogatory names for us, Suntan Association, supposedly. I never heard that one directly, but, we had to use flight suits, and we grew our hair out a little bit because we, if we get caught, we don't want to have a direct, we don't want to look exactly like Marines. There's a reason for that, because if they catch somebody with a bolt-action rifle out in the middle of nowhere, they know he is a huge intelligence asset, right? So not to say that that's an effective answer, but there's reasons to everything we do. So as far as employing that now, I would take a guess, and I would say that especially now more than ever, I am going to have to call back on that specific trait, tact, and I'm going to have to use the same exact tactics that I used that were, I employed in the Marine Corps in talking to, my chain of command, because, maybe there's something coming down from the doc office when I come in and it's not best for the crew that I got. Maybe it's something where, I could either say, okay, let's just do it and shut up about it. Or maybe I can employ a little bit of tact, maybe get this moved to another day, whatever. So that's one though. I'm of the mindset that everything that I picked up on in the military has a direct application to the job that I do now. Every one of those traits has a direct application to the job that I do now. All the tactics. So straight intelligence gathering, just being able to communicate effectively, right? Understand what people want, understanding what's overkill, and I struggle with it. Everyone struggles with it. But, I try to look back to all of the stuff that I learned and realize that just because it's not talking about, combat, it's still applicable to the stuff that we do. Picking up on cues, we pull up on a house that's on fire. We have literally seconds to, give a good on-scene report, depending on what we see, and we have to pick up on certain clues. It's no different. It really isn't. It's just a matter of understanding that, the environment has changed, but the tactics, the techniques, maybe not.
Yeah, I know when, we are asking a lot of the officers, to give intel over the radio when they arrive on the scene. It's at least eight points for your initial size up, then you have your supplemental unit report, report from the rear if possible, status of the occupancy is a big thing. These are all things that are going through your head. It's not just, hey, I'm going to pull a line, go into the front door and put the fire out. You need to pass that intel on, so everybody kind of knows what's going on the fire ground, what your game plan is, and then when the incident commander gets there, as long as it matches what you said is continually happening. If it's not, then questions need to be asked. So I figured that the training that you received, when you became a corporal and then you became a sergeant before you left, that training you received, it's got to play over into the fire service. There are some things that you can use in order to how to talk to people and how to get information from people and how to get people. That's like almost the down and dirty definition of leadership is to get people to do things that you want them to do. With that, and a lot of that, you learned that in the military as you became, because corporals and the sergeants, they're usually pretty young guys, mm-hmm. And you in the fire service, you have the opportunity to get promoted pretty quick. You could actually be in charge of guys that are older or more senior, or time in wise. That whole thing comes back down to ego and tact and how you approach stuff like that. So we talked about the traits through the Marines, and I want to break them down. You and I have talked about this a lot, and what each means, and and then we'll pick a few off and see how they apply to the fire service. So the acronym was JJ did tie buckle, and for the people that don't understand what that is, Dave, I'm going to allow you to explain what each one knows. And I know, being the good Marine, you know what each one is. It was pounded into your head.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that's how the code that you live by as you went through. So go ahead.
So JJ did tie buckle: justice, judgment, dependability, integrity, decisiveness, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance.
And people get upset when I talk about the 13-point size up. The Wallace was hot or Cole was wealth. We have our acronyms obviously in the fire service, which is another takeaway from the military. So the military is full of acronyms,
loaded with
things
them.
that I didn't understand. But let's go ahead and break it down. So go ahead.
Sure. So starting with justice. So justice, obviously it's a justice, the what's right, what's wrong. I think, because we're focusing on leadership and leadership traits, justice is being, I guess you could say, sort of being that beacon for what is right. So obviously as a leader, and I don't want to, focus solely on discipline, but, there's going to come times when, discipline, might be necessary, right? And I don't think that any leader looks forward to it, but, you need to ensure that, whatever you decide, that it's fair and that it's just. You can't treat someone any better or any worse than anyone else under your charge, especially when it comes to operations, because there's not going to be any buy-in from that individual, for anything that you're putting down. So the next one is judgment, and judgment is one that kind of ties into decisiveness, but just having sound judgment, right? Making good moral choices that are of benefit to not necessarily you, but the people that are under you. Now, usually after judgment, they say dependability. I changed that and I put decisiveness for the 2 Ds after judgment, and there's a reason. A term that I heard a long time ago that I absolutely loved, and it's super applicable to the fire department, is this decision making. It's better to make the good choice right now than the better choice tomorrow. So for someone outside of the fire service, outside of the military, they would hear that and they would be like, no, that's false. Make the better choice tomorrow.
We don't have that kind of time.
Exactly. So a lot of people, a lot of my peers, and I love to, talk to people who, don't have a military background, but, I consider, outstanding leaders. A lot of them, they always kind of focus on that. I never understood that whole make a decision until I became a leader. Well, I kind of already, going up through the ranks, I kind of knew about that. So when I hear that, I'm like, I get it. I understand what they mean, because the one thing that they want to keep you from doing is freezing. Once you freeze, that's it. Everything falls downhill. And there's a lot of different schools of thoughts on this. I believe leaders are made. They're not born. I think you can be born with, leadership potential, but I think ultimately you're made. I think that, when it comes to something like decisiveness and making a decision immediately, I think that's one of those things that you can always go back and you should go back and, and look over the choices you made. But, make the decision, make it right then and there. And if you're following these traits, and that's something someone used to told me a long time ago, if you're following all these traits to begin with, you're going to make the right decision. But, trust yourself, have sound judgment, make the decision, make the good one now, move forward.
And I've talked to a lot of people, about making decisions, and people are afraid to make decisions. And I think what it comes down to, the one thing I say, we don't want to get in trouble. And, I was like, who's getting in trouble for making decisions? Unless you're making blatant, terrible decisions. I think what it comes down to is the experience. And I tell people, I said, if you're trying to promote as fast as you can because you want the power of the rank, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. The only way you can make fast decisions that are going to be accurate or going to be at the time that you make that decision is the best for what it is having the experience back behind it. If you've got 4 years in the fire service and now you're a lieutenant, there's no way you could have had the experience of things that have happened as a firefighter to be able to put that information together to make a quick decision. So you're going to run into that whole freezing thing, and everybody knows that when there is a void of leadership, somebody is going to take it over. So to avoid that void, you need to have the experience behind you in order to make sound decisions. Now, of course, after it's all said and done, you said, I could have done this, which would have been a little bit better. That's the hindsight is always 20/20. Then you have the people that want to play the armchair quarterbacks or the Monday morning quarterbacks. That want to, this is what you should have done. I can't believe you did that, but you weren't there. The decision that was made, a lot of times you'll find with that experience is that decision that you made works. Was there a better way to do it? Sure, but what you did worked. We run into a lot of that in the fire service, and those are things that, you had talked about how the battalion chief's the last in line in operations, and then we hear stuff from above. And I hear it a lot. I get a phone call, well, why did you do that? Well, I did that because of this. Why did you let them do that? Well, they did that because of this. You guys aren't going to hear that because you don't need to. I'll take care of it right then and there. If they don't like the way you did something, but I'm fine with it, yeah, that's where it's going to end. So you got to have that experience behind you. You wouldn't take a boot and put them in a leadership position as a sergeant that a sergeant should be doing to make decisions in the heat of the battle. They're not going to be able to make a good decision. You're going to get somebody hurt.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I gotta throw it. So a little bit more on that. When I became an engine driver, Captain Milani, he was there with me during this process, and driving him is is one of the coolest things ever. But the one thing is about Sam Villani is when the bells go off, it's business. It's business. He is and if you've ever worked with him, that he is dead serious. So we were running a 2-in-1 in Company 2's area. We were coming out of University. It was the first right after University going towards Company 2. The name of the street slipping me. But
it wasn't Seek, was it?
Yes, it was Seek. So, get out fast, get out fast, get out fast. Well, I get out fast. As we cross Piney, I think we smelled a little bit of smoke. So it's like, okay, we might have a little bit of work here, right? So, right off the bat, Sam being who he is, he's, hey, I know you're new, but this road, it's really tight. Let's let the truck go first. So me just, being young, being new, I'm not even processing what he's saying. So I start to turn on the seat, right? So he's trying to correct me. I pick up what he's saying, right? All that, whatever they want to call it, temporal, just being nervous, right? Again, experience. It was my first. I'm like, wow, this is something, I want to do it right. So in that moment, I made a decision. I looked over to my right. I saw what I thought was soft grass. I did not take into consideration that, even though it was cold out and it just got done raining, the angle that the grass was on, I decided to beach the wagon. I got 3 tires up and it got stuck. And we were quite a ways off from the structure. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, it was something very minor. But when we got back to the firehouse, he loved to sit on the front bumper and watch, the cars go up and down University. He hated that office, which was great because I never felt like I was in trouble. So not that I did, not that I thought I was in trouble, but what was really cool is he brought me out front and he's like, look, I'm not upset that, you decided to do that. He's like, that's a lot of things that you had to take in, that it's going to take experience. You're going to have to learn to slow down and process what's going on in front of you. He's like, it's a new thing. He's like, I am glad though that, once you realized what I was saying, you made a decision. He's like, it wasn't the right decision. He's like, but I can tell you from experience that I honestly thought you were just going to sit there and block the road. He's like, so at least your decision allowed the truck to get past. He's like, now, we need to go back and we need to look at, how do we improve upon this right now? So I never felt like I was in trouble or, it was like, hey, you did something, it didn't work out, so we're going to fix it, right? And it was, it was that easy.
That's the way it's got to be. You got to be able to, you don't pull somebody in and say, I can't believe you throw your hands up in the air because you're going to lose that person right away. You use it as a lessons learned type thing, and you put that in your Rolodex, and the next time when the captain says, hey, hold up for the truck, now you know the why behind the reasoning.
Yep.
And
yep. And
lesson learned. If you do the same thing again, then we're going to think something's wrong with you, and we'll deal with that accordingly.
I pull that up a lot. I focus on, that's what it was. It was a lesson learned on something that, I never. I mean, I would have. I guess I would have eventually focused on, but it's something more that I consider now, and I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad that it happened in the way that it happened. And
well, you've got that now in the back of your mind. So when you're riding the front seat of an engine, when you're detailed to wherever, it's like, hey, we're going to let the truck get in here first. I'm looking at the map; it's kind of tight. You can throw that Y out there real quick, and then then when they don't. They're not acknowledging what you're saying. That's when you can lead them. Hey, you're going to yell at them, get their attention. But now
absolutely.
you know the why behind the reason.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the experience. So let's see. First, okay, so we are at integrity. So integrity, and everybody hears the term integrity all the time. Again, this is leadership traits. So this is being that moral figure that the people under you can look at and say, hey, he makes the right decisions. He doesn't, he's not corrupt, or, he's not doing, and the smallest thing that you do, when it benefits you over everybody else, that is when there is a breakdown in integrity. And that is, that is the crack in the foundation. That is your trust that you build with, and I don't like to use the term subordinates, but your crew, the people that are with you. So you hear it a lot, and everybody's like, integrity, integrity, courage, yada yada yada. It's you actually got to think of how it applies to everything that you do, not just operationally.
I tell people, when we talk about integrity in leadership role, I tell people, I said I can sum it up really easy. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking.
Absolutely.
When nobody's watching what you're doing, you're still continually doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And that's how you build your integrity. And it takes a long time to build that integrity, and it's really easy to lose it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's when no one's looking, there's nothing to gain. You're just doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
So beyond that, we have dependability. Mm-hmm. And this is something that actually, not only was I newly promoted, but again, I have some of the best leaders in the world, and going back to Sam, he was a big assist, and you were there as well for when I got my state certification for teaching, which was it was just amazing. Watch guys like you and Sam do it. And I'm like, now I'm up here now.
Right.
It's another reason just to times are good. So. But going back to dependability, so there it was busy. It was really, really busy, and I had a class that was depending on me, and I had because I was in mentorship at the time, I had which those who don't know, it's like a lieutenant mentorship. Our department's doing it. It's new. They put the promotees that are about to be promoted in a house where they ride the front seat, get the experience. So anyway. There was, very quickly, it felt almost overwhelming. But, thinking back to these traits, all it takes is one time that someone, and I'm not saying something, something that I can't control. But, if you start telling people, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you can count on me to have your welfare, your overall well-being, all of that, It's important. It falls down to dependability, and again, that is something that will either make or break you as a leader. So beyond that, moving into tact, and
we talked about that,
and we talked a little bit about tact. I think that is huge. It's lines of communication. When we talk about combat and errors in combat. Communication.
Right.
When the war,
the blue on blues.
Absolutely. When we talk about line of duty deaths, communication.
That's always one of the top three.
Absolutely. I mean, we are looking into the science behind people receiving messages and sending messages. And it's, a lot of times it's like, look, it's important to keep those lines open, keep that communication line open. You have to be approachable. Never did I think when I was, at any of my firehouses, there were leaders, there were, and I use that term as opposed to officers, because there were leaders there that, I could approach, that I knew no matter what, I could come to them and they would have my best interest in mind. And it's a comforting feeling. It gives you buy-in to that individual leader. it just, it's important. It's absolutely important.
I think it's more important in today's day and age where it's so much easier to put your face down in a phone and send a text as opposed to looking someone in the eye and actually talking to them. It's I don't want to say it's a dying art, but the art of communication, to be able to talk to each other, to give information, to receive information, to make sure that the information is understood. That's where we run into a lot of our issues that we either get misinformation or we didn't understand what was being said and we didn't take the time to say, I don't understand what you're telling me. Can you give me that again? Even going forward with, if somebody does something wrong, and you as a leader, as an officer, you need to take a look at what that person did and then be able to say, I'm not going to say you did something wrong. I need to look back at myself and say, how didn't I explain it correctly to you? What I obviously failed somewhere in my line of communication to tell you or to let you know what needed to be done because you didn't do the right thing. It ultimately has to come back to me. And then we fix that as opposed to flying off the handle and just pointing fingers and taking the blame and pushing it on somebody else. The buck stops with the person that's in charge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would have, recently, he was a float lieutenant, but we considered him an unofficial part of 16. Jason Smith, he was really, really big on that. Whenever, he would go over something if he was at 16 that day and I didn't understand it, and there were times when I just, I knew like, hey, I was, you said it right. I understood what you were saying. I just, I screwed up.
I didn't process it that way.
Right. But I always thought, he's taking the time out. He wants to know, hey, was this me? Did you not, or is there something that, even minute details. It's just, it's little things like that. Even being self-aware of these traits and what they're doing. And, he's another, he didn't come from the military, but he employs these principles. And it's like, you can see the people aren't even specifically looking for him, but they're still employing these specific principles and how functional they are. Right. So, where are we at? E. So, endurance. So endurance is, and, I love stories. I love the relating stories. So I McSaney Avenue. It was a 12 box. I was with Captain Villani again on this night. Jason Smith was there as well. There was actually a lot of people there. It was it was basically a 1 box, and this was a busy night. Well, one battalion one. Right. It was a 12 box. This was a busy night. We had run a fire in Company 2's area. We were exhausted. It was late at night. So we get this, this, I don't want to say the term great fire because, obviously it was property loss, but
in the fire service world, we have
we
have things. Back when I was a fireman and a lieutenant and a captain, I was like, man, I hope we can catch fire today. And now being the responsible battalion chief, I say, well, if there is a fire today, which I hope there isn't, but if there is, I'd really like to be there.
Absolutely. And we say that because we are the that's why we're not saying that because we want to watch your stuff burn. We are saying that because we are going to do a better job than anybody else that is going to show up there, and we just want the chance to show and prove.
And anybody that's listening that doesn't understand the fire service, I kind of equate it to, a fighter pilot in the Air Force, is that they spend their whole career learning how to maneuver that plane and get behind the enemy and fire missiles and drop bombs and shoot their guns to kill and take out the enemy. That's what they do. And then when they get into that opportunity, well, that's their job. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with the fire department, is that we train and train and train, and we light fires, and we do rescues, and we do all that kind of stuff. So when 911 is called, we're good at what we do, and it's our job. I don't want to say we revel in the fact that we're going to somebody's residence that's incurring property damage, but if it's happening, we want to be there because we want to stop it.
Absolutely. We are. Yep. The chief hit it right on the nose. We are great at what we do. We enjoy stopping this. We enjoy being that shield, and that's why we're here. So that is, a lot of times that's misinterpreted. I see that a lot of times in comment threads, and I know social media isn't always kind to the fire service. But, that's there. A lot of time there's, I don't know, I guess you would call it subtext, but,
right.
Behind it. So Endurance. So yeah, McSaney Avenue. So started in the garage, some high octane racing fuels. Very quickly, I believe it was a balloon framed house, but it got up in the attic pretty quickly. This was was a beater of a fire. And at one point, if you go back and listen to the audio, the battalion chief literally says on the radio, "I know you guys are tired. I know you're exhausted. There's nobody else available in the county right now. It's busy. So, we got to do what we got to do. Just hunker down." It was the only time in my career that I actually did a hot bottle swap in an IDLH, which wasn't absolutely necessary, but me and Sam did it, and the pictures from that night, we were exhausted. So very quickly, I was running on fumes. We all were, and you would see the good officers. They would start to assist us. But two, you could see them putting in more effort. And when I, as a young firefighter, see my officer working twice as hard, and I've bought into that officer, that is what kicks on that last 10%. It's the same thing in the military. It's these people that I admire. When I see them, it's almost like misery loves company. But it's I guess motivation does too, because I don't know, that kicks me into that extra drive. If I would have been on a job like McSaney Avenue, I don't know if I would have lasted as long as I did without the leaders that I had. We literally collapsed in the back of the wagon. I've never, it's just, it was an exhausting job. It was an absolutely exhausting job. And, we fought as hard as we could, and we saved what we could save, and it was just one of those times that I think that the leaders made that fire what that was. There was a couple of really, really solid leaders there that night that were just really getting out in front of everybody and leading from the front, and that's something that I think back to, and I hope one day I get the opportunity to pass that forward or pay that forward. So, moving on to bearing. So bearing, when you think of bearing in the military, because we do a lot of stuff with formations and so on and so forth, and you think of the Marine Corps, they say bearing is, the ability to sit still in formation, and that's all well and good. But if you're not, specific to a drill-centered MOS, bearing to me is, there was something that someone told me a long time ago that really stuck with me, especially for promotion. And they said, when someone walks into the firehouse and all they know is that somewhere amongst those group of firefighters is a supervisor, you should look like that supervisor. They should be able to pick you out without even knowing it. Go back to, a picture of a group of firefighters posing, and see if you can pick the officer out just based on the uniform, the attitude, the presence. A lot of times you can. And I don't think that's, being the uniform police. It's just, again, that's being the officer, that's setting the example. And that to me is how I apply bearing to the fire service. I think that's really important. Sometimes you can walk in a firehouse and say, I know who the officer is. I don't, granted, I know most people in this county, but, if you didn't, it's nice to, walk into a firehouse and say that. And if that's you, then that's excellent. So moving forward, moving to C, courage. So, you. Unselfishness. So unselfishness. There is a book that was actually part of the promotional study group for our go-round called Leaders Eat Last. And so that's something that's done in the Marine Corps. NCOs are always at the back of the line. And, there's a reason for that. And the reason is not just so your junior Marines eat first. I like to tell people like this, is when you think of your children, you would never, sit down and do things in front of your children. right? Especially if you were doing something, important, let's say you're working with your teenage kids, and lunchtime comes and you only have 2 sandwiches, who's getting those sandwiches, right? Obviously not you. So now I'm not saying that, the people in the firehouse are your children, but they kind of are.
Right.
You need to treat them the same. You need to apply the same principles that, you are there to look out for them. So when I was, and again, the greatest job in the fire department is being on a truck company, especially being on one that bends in the middle. I can't think about that without smiling.
Right.
But, I the independence of it was great. But, the guy who rode in front of me, everything I did, every action I took, everything we did for that 24 hours was his responsibility. His job was to make sure I was fed. His job was to make sure I knew what his game plan was because, I like to think of myself as, I like training. I like doing stuff, and people like doing things different. And if there's a different way you're doing something, I got to know about it before. I can't just assume. So, there's a lot of responsibilities that entails, and now I'm in that spot. So now when someone's riding behind me, those are things that I'm going to consider. That one of those a huge tenet of that is unselfishness, is putting their needs before mine. The minute I do something that benefits me and doesn't benefit them, they're going to pick up on that. And again, that's going to be the crack in the wall.
Everything that the officer does has to benefit the team as a whole.
Absolutely.
And the fire service, not just themselves.
Absolutely.
And so, yes.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And the funny thing about the Leaders Eat Last, I read the book too. When I am eating at the firehouse, it's like a struggle for me to guys, go ahead and get something. No, Chief, go ahead. They want me to go first. I'm like, no, you guys got to find look, guys, you're going to get a call long before I'm going to get a call. So get your food now, get your dinner. And
right.
While you all are out running your medical locals and all that stuff, I'll just eat by myself. I'm fine.
Right.
So it is a struggle with that. I try to keep that mentality, and a lot of times at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to stop arguing with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, and that's respect.
It is respect, and I get that.
The chief comes in, and it's hey, the chief's here.
They just need to understand that you guys need to get your food. You guys need to eat because you could be going out on a call, way before me.
Sure.
You need to get your food.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So now courage.
So courage. So courage is, we think of courage operationally, right? Oh, that guy will go into a fire. That guy, okay. And that's awesome, right? And we're all firemen, firefighters. We all want to go to work, or at least, I'd like to think we all, want to go to work. But, courage, it's easy to be courageous. I don't want to say it's easy to be courageous on the fire ground, but it kind of is. It's easy to be courageous on the fire ground, right? It's easy to be the hero. It's not easy to be courageous, when take that, get rid of the fire ground and make it an administrative thing, right, against an employee, and you got to put yourself in the firing line, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a discipline issue. It could be a multitude of things, but, there are times when I think, and I've seen it throughout my career, I've seen, times where I guess leaders, officers are, I don't want to say scared to speak up, but they're, they just kind of go along with the flow, and the upper leadership maybe isn't even aware of what's going on, right? So let's say we've got a standard day and there is a company that's being detailed for, I don't know, some menial task, right, to assist with something. And maybe that particular day is the last shift before, firefighter Smith goes for his driving test. Now, it would be really easy to sit there and say, oh, you know what, we got to do this. The chief's making us do this, let's go. But, what's not easy is saying, hey, let me try to use a little bit of that tact that I was talking about before. Call up the chief, talk to him or her. Maybe, they're not aware of, hey, it's so-and-so's last day, maybe it's not. And if there's nothing that can be done, there's nothing that can be done. But, when someone just kind of gives you that blanket answer of, nah, there's nothing that can be done. Well, you didn't even check, people pay attention to that. Right. So, that courage, you need to apply that same amount of courage, in all aspects of the job, not just the operational side. So, knowledge. My first squad leader when I got into the Marine Corps, and he actually, he was a really, really good example of what a good squad leader was. He himself had gotten into a little bit of trouble, I guess, early on in his career. And he had also promoted to sergeant before everybody else. Now, the Marine Corps, they're starting to change. But before, especially before OIF and OEF, their discipline was damning. If something happened to you in your career, it pretty much, there's a term we had, terminal lance. It just meant, you were never going to promote.
Not past corporal?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So something he did was he made himself so aware of our job as infantry Marines and what it entailed. And he was by no means, and this guy was, he was one of my first examples of, how someone else can push you far, far better and far harder than you could ever push yourself. But he knew, and he did that by, not going out on the weekends, by staying in, and by, just being proficient at his job. And you can do that in the military, right? You can become very aware, by looking through books and reading mission statements and stuff like that. It's just everybody knew that if this particular sergeant said something, it was law. Nobody questioned it. So if you were doing something, if you were patrolling, and he said, hey, that's not the hand signal for, contact right or whatever, you wouldn't even bother looking it up. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a hell of a lot of respect. Now, with the fire service, it's a little bit more, it's not as one-dimensional as that, because we have so many different ways to accomplish the tasks that we're trying to accomplish. Good ways, I should say. But I do still think that there is this, maybe not an imaginary line, but, there is this limit to, there are people that I just know by conversations, by, how they are and what they talk about and how they interject, that they are very aware of their job, of the requirements of the tasks, So going back to driver checkoff, Franco Martinez getting checked off as a driver under him. There was a lot more than what was in that book that I had to do and know. The flip side is I can think of a couple of times years later where people from that firehouse would call me up and ask me about that truck company. And I remember feeling such a sense of pride that, I'm not even at this firehouse anymore. And they're calling me and asking me, and it might have been a weird question, hey, what is the grate on the front of a fan called? Or, Scrench was always a good one. The tool for the saw. There's a couple other good ones, but still, it's just like, that's something, right. That tells me that, hey, they're thinking of me, when it comes to this piece of, and we live, with these apparatus, with these tools, we literally live with them. So, knowledge, it's pretty self-explanatory, but you've got to be, you can have all these other traits. It is not a substitute for, lacking in knowledge. You've got to be proficient in whatever your job is. You have to know what it entails. You have to know the basics at a bare minimum. At a bare minimum. You should know a lot more than the basics, but
absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on, loyalty. Loyalty, again, you can kind of factor that in with some of the other traits, but loyalty, being loyal to your crew, being loyal to, the not just your crew, but the job, the mission, maintaining that loyalty between your crew and your crew's welfare and the mission of the fire department, and not wavering on either one, right? We, as officers, we continually have to put people in harm's way. It is always going to be a part of this job. It is never going to disappear. I don't think anybody, agrees with that. The risk is always going to be significant. There's always going to be, things that happen. And, we whether we say it, whether we do it just because we've trained on it and they know it and they
automatically do it, but the minute we get inside that building, or the minute we put ourselves in an environment that's not safe to us, as the officers, we're responsible for that. But again, there's a mission to accomplish, right? There's somebody that needs saving, or whatever, we need to factor that in. We need to understand that there are expectations of us, and you could still be loyal to your crew, to your team, and at the same time accomplish these missions. They all know that. It's called the fire department, so we understand for the most part that there is risk involved. And then the last one, the one that I save, again, I swapped these two, enthusiasm. Being enthusiastic about your job, about your organization. And you don't have to, everybody, people immediately say, well, does that mean, if you're not in 100% agreement of, the way your department's handling one thing or handling another, it doesn't matter. Look at your mission, look at your mission statement, look at what you're trying to accomplish day in and day out. And train for that. And if you're enthusiastic about it, and again, I go back to him, a great example, Sam. Sam was, it was him and Franco. It was fun. It was fun. It was a blast. It was, we loved doing stuff with them. But I can tell you more often than not, he was the one that was, just out messing with, and we would see that and we would kind of circle around him and it would just go from there. It was always these informal sessions that just turned into, us being out back, with these crazy search scenarios.
I think with enthusiasm, as an officer or as a leader in an organization, if you show up to work, every shift, enthusiastic about your job and ready to go, that's going to rub off. That is you're going to have two mindsets that's going to happen. One is like, this guy, I want to work for him. I don't want to let this guy down. The other one is like, look at this guy. What's he trying to do? Those people are going to go away.
Yep.
They're going to go somewhere else. But the ones that are like, hey, this captain comes to work. He is happy to be here at work. He's always wanting to do some stuff. He's always upbeat. Even if, through the worst scenarios that we have, he tries to find the silver lining. That's going to definitely play into how the shift is going to interact with each other as well. So I think enthusiasm is, once you start losing the enthusiasm for the job, is when you need to start taking a look at, should I still be doing this job, or do I need to change what I'm doing? Do I need to go somewhere else because I'm getting complacent? And they all go hand in hand. If you lose enthusiasm, then you're going to start getting complacency. And when you start having that happen, then we start to get into this dangerous spiral where we start to break down, where you have injuries and deaths and things. So I think enthusiasm for the job. I tell people, I said, they say, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, I'm still having fun. And it's true. I wake up in the morning, my alarm goes off, I'm up, I don't hit the snooze 48 times, get dressed, and I'm out the door. You know, and I'm at work, a couple hours before shift starts. I enjoy the job, and there's a lot of people out there that are like that.
Yeah, it's honestly, I still can't believe I get to do this for a living, and now I get to do it as an officer. It's the best place to be in the world. It really is. Well, it really is.
I'm glad that you got a chance to break this down, because, like I said, I've been looking at it, in the military books and things like that. They have little quick definitions, but to be able to hear it from somebody who had to not only memorize and understand it, but then had to live by it for the 5 or 6 years that you were actually with the Marines, and then coming into the fire service and then taking that same acronym and applying it to the job, it can. And I knew that we've always been called a paramilitary organization or quasi-military organization.
Absolutely.
So we do take a lot of the traits from the military and apply that to the situations that we find ourselves in. And I think that being able to take the information that you've given today with the acronyms, with what you did on the job, and how you learned, the things that you learned in the Marines, and bridging it into the fire service, should definitely have people allow people to start thinking more about, where does the fire service come from? Where are we now? And what attributes and traits can we take from the military and bring into the fire service? Not just the technology that the military comes with, but also the classroom stuff that you guys have. And I tell everybody, I said, they've been doing leadership stuff in the military for like 70 years, and they've had time to vet it and find out what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's really time for the fire service to start maybe partnering up with some of these organizations, whether it be the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, whatever. I mean, we are in the Washington metropolitan area. We are rich with military in this area. There should be no reason why we can't start to cross-train and gather information that they have and to bring it in here. And that was kind of what started this whole podcast thing about this leadership is are we going down the right road? Where are we missing the boat, and what can we do to make it better? So, Dave, I appreciate you coming on here, and we even got to go 20 minutes over what we normally do, but I'm glad you were here, and I'm glad that you got to really lay this whole thing out, and to give the people that are listening to the 6 or 7 people who listen to this podcast get to actually kind of hear a breakdown of the military versus the fire service and how they come together. So, thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, I was very, very excited to do this. I'm glad I got to do it. It's no secret. I'm extremely, extremely excited about this new position, about what I'm getting, this whole new world I'm getting ready to step into. I've watched guys, hell, I ran my first fire with you ever. And that's kind of crazy that now I'm sitting here, as a new lieutenant talking to you as a chief. I mean, it's amazing to me. It's incredible. So, I'm huge on. There are so many things that I think that I apply from the military to this job daily. They benefit. I think it would go the other way too. I think there's a lot of stuff that the fire service picks up on leadership wise that the military could really benefit from. You're living with these people, you're going through entire careers with individuals, and there's this dichotomy of they move up, they move down, so on and so forth. People, it's just it's crazy, and there's a lot of lessons learned there. I will say that my final thing is the one thing that I always remembered is a lot of the people I worked with here and in the military, I had buy-in to them. I looked at them and I'm like, I want to do good for them. It's like if someone told me to clean a bathroom, someone just random told me, hey, clean that bathroom, I'll pay you $10. I'll clean the bathroom. I'm not going to do a crap job.
Right.
But if someone, if someone like Sam or Jason or, told me to clean that bathroom, I am going to detail that bathroom, like nobody's business, right? Because I'm doing, and it's not that I want to do, it's just, I have buy-in to them, I want to show them, hey, everything you do for me, I appreciate, and I want to push that forward by being the best that I can for you. And if I could ever, I'm sitting here because of them. So, if I could pay that forward to one person, that's worth it to me. So I just, and
that's the thing. Take what you've learned, throughout your career in the military and coming into the fire service. And when these new people are coming in, find the opportunity to be able to, just throw little things out there to them, or, hey, let's talk about this today while you're sitting at the kitchen table. Hey, what are your thoughts on this? You'd be surprised. People will really want to engage and tell you. That's one thing the firefighters will always do. They will tell you their opinion, whether you want it or not. But when you engage them and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or tell me what you think about that, you'll be able to start to see, their line of thinking, and then you can start to interject some of the things that you've learned, and that's how you pay it forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, man.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Again, you can find us on social media. Side Alpha Leadership's on Instagram. It's on Twitter. And or you can send private messages on either one of those platforms. Again, every month we'll be putting out another podcast on leadership. So if you got any questions, by all means, send me a message, and I'll do my best to answer them. Have a good month.